Well, I think there are a number of issues, as I see it, in terms of pension saving for individuals. Firstly, people need to save enough. Most people don't save enough money, and saving enough is not 5%, it's probably 15 or 20%, which is very difficult. Investors should build portfolios that are as diversified as possible, so are robust to different economic environments. And the third observation I would make is that investors should always focus on minimizing the costs of their investment. So again, most people don't understand the power of compounding and compound interest. Reducing fees now actually will give you a much better payoff longer term. So I think people need to save more, generally speaking. They need to do it in a very diverse way, so they're protected from different financial and economic environments, and also they need to try and manage their costs as well as they can. So I would probably focus on the latter. That's the first one and the last one.
Which kind of assets they should look at? I mean, equities, bonds, alternative kinds of investments?
Okay. Well, the problem, I talked earlier just a moment ago about balance, but the problem with balance is people do need to buy bonds. The problem with bonds is they generally look very unattractive in terms of returns. So if you're issuing bonds at 1%, well, you have inflation at 2 or 3%. If you're issuing bonds at yields of 1%, you're going to generate negative returns. So they're not a great investment. So governments are trying to force people away from bonds, which is fine. Equities to us look quite good value. Equity markets don't look that expensive. So equities relative to bonds look very attractive to us. We're not suggesting that growth is going to be very, very high, but we're thinking it will be reasonable, and equities will generally do okay in that environment. Alternatives make sense for investors, but the problem with alternatives is they tend to be very expensive. That's the problem. They tend to come with very high costs. If you can think about alternatives and doing them in as cheap a way as possible, if you decompose the returns for many alternatives, you eventually get back to bond and equity and commodity returns or whatever. If you can decompose those returns and get them cheaply, that's a very attractive strategy. But again, the problem is most people find that very hard to do. So again, you're trying to do the clever things and not pay the high price.